By the end of next week, you're going to see a lot of Monster Hunter content creators try desperately to run damage control for something that is Capcom's responsibility, Capcom's choice, and, in the eyes of many it seems, Capcom's massive mistake. Now, while it's true that in a cynical light, one can see it that way, painting this as a blind fandom desperately running damage control for a corporate giant. In the more earnest light of honesty, it's just people who genuinely have affection for and faith in, and an emotional attachment to, a video game series just trying to fence off the inevitable surge of intentionally pessimistic rage bait and misinformation click farming. So what is this all about? Well, we are fruitlessly going to be trying to protect idiots from other idiots. Hello again, I am Blunty, and the second Monster Hunter Wilds beta, as I record, is 10 days away now. Capcom, when this was announced, called it a response to requests from players who were unable to participate the first time or simply wish to play again. We've decided to hold a second open beta test. It even adds some new content that the first beta did not have, namely at least one new monster to fight in the form of Gypsyrus, and something else still as yet a mystery to us. They also said that while the development team is currently focused on improving the game and refining systems, at least in part based on player feedback from the first beta, those of you who played, you did fill out the survey, didn't you? I sure did. I told them all about what I thought could be better. And that includes things like changes to weapon mechanics and balance and performance and the like. And so the devs also said, quote, "Please bear in mind that these improvements, including performance, game balance, weapon mechanics, known issues, and more, will not be reflected in the OBT2 build, the open beta test." In other words, the underlying code of this second beta is exactly the same as the first beta, even though it includes extra monsters and the like, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's this that is the perceived problem, the mistake Capcom are making in the eyes of some. I'm sure few of you are ignorant of this, but there was a lot of noise during and after the first beta, much of it useful feedback. Deconstructing the new systems in play, the weapon mechanics and combat dynamics. We spoke a lot about it in the fandom. And a lot of the content creators broke it down in their own words and such. And then some of the discourse was just frankly whining about silly shit. Pretty much par for the course when talking about video games. But performance was a hot topic. Because even those of us with high-end rigs, in my case, a Ryzen 7 7700X and 32GB of system RAM, paired with a Radeon RX 7900X TX, 24GB of VRAM, the best graphics card that AMD currently have on offer, although that's about to change, I still could not max out the game, have all the graphic stuff turned on and up, and run it at 4K at a reliable 60 FPS lock. Just it would not happen. So obviously, performance issues there. There were a lot of graphical issues tied to the upscalers and frame generation tech, also extremely unpleasant ghosting and the like, for example, and of course the infamous origami monsters due to VRAM issues some people have on their older graphics cards and whatnot. And it's this stuff that has people panicking, thinking that a repeat of these exact same issues will convince first-timers and the more casual players that coming to the second beta running on this same code will convince them that Capcom haven't been fixing anything in all this time. They're not fixing it, and this is how the game is going to launch, like with all these bugs and performance issues. Like they did a second beta and they didn't make it any better. What's going on? You know. But better not buy it at launch, cancel your pre-orders and whatnot. And so, because of this worry, there's been a lot of rumbling in the community over the last couple of weeks in particular about trying to get the word out that these issues have already been addressed by Capcom, and that this beta does not fully represent the performance in particular of the launch state of the game. Talking about fan campaigns to effectively spam this around to get the information out there and in front of more casual players, scraping and praying and begging that Capcom themselves will put some kind of big red messaging, on the load screens or something about it, or a warning even before you download it. Panic about this is high. And then you've got others claiming that Capcom are just idiots for letting people experience these issues anew, claiming that it'll do more harm than good to the reputation of the game and sales of the game. But I say, you can't protect idiots from being idiots. Well, you can try. You can damn sure try, but recent unrelated events in the northern hemisphere of the world seem to demonstrate that there'll be a limited success rate on trying to protect idiots from themselves. Those face-eating leopards sure are getting fat very, very quickly. In any case, these issues with the first beta didn't actually do any harm at all. In fact, shortly after the original beta ran, the game itself rapidly shot to one of the top-selling games on Steam, and people with even half a clue about how betas like this work weren't too worried at all after the first beta anyway. The first beta was held at the end of October 2024, which marks it as fully 125 days from launch. 125 days from launch. Although at the time we didn't know the exact launch date, but that's nearly 18 weeks, or 4 months, in other words. And for a beta like this to even be made available publicly for download, especially on consoles, we, that is, the people who have assembled half a clue about how the industry works, know the code for the beta had to have been frozen several weeks, if not months, beforehand to make sure it was stable enough and could pass the system's approval processes and testing that both the Xbox and PlayStation require of any and all software made available for download through their respective storefronts to pass. You cannot assemble a beta like this with the currently evolving code that's being worked on. You have to freeze it at some point going, okay, this is the code base we're going to use for the beta, and then progress from there. And that is at least one of the large reasons why the second beta is pinned to the same outdated code instead of being updated to the newer build. The process of preparing it, testing it, getting it approved and passed by Xbox and PlayStation is something that would require a decent chunk of man-hours internally, and even more dealing with the resubmission and pre-approval by the console brands themselves. Sony are notorious for being pains in the asses to deal with on this side of the fence. I've spoken to more than one developer who have some very unkind things to say about Sony's approval process off the record. Valve, for the record, have a much more passive attitude. If this was a PC-only beta, we might very well have just gotten newer code. Point is, though, the second beta wasn't even part of the original plan. So there was no plan to use updated code for a second beta because they weren't even sure they were going to have one. The dev team are on record a few times now talking about this, and a second beta was something they had considered but never committed to. So suddenly pulling a number of their staff away from the far more vital job, I think you'll agree, of working on the full game's release code to slap up a fresh beta download on fresher code would not be the smartest or most efficient move they could possibly make at this juncture. So the choices were: use the existing code and unlock a little more content as an enticement for returning players to give it another go, put something fresh in there, and thus provide Capcom with another opportunity to gather data about how robust their multiplayer infrastructure is. Because that was one of the core reasons they ran a beta in the first place, so they could test that stuff. Because this is the first time a Monster Hunter game is multi-platform cross-play with multiplayer. So it was either do that, or they could have just not offered up a second beta and proceeded with the normal marketing pushes just as planned. Obviously, they considered the upsides of the data gathering and marketing opportunities a second beta has outweigh any repeat of the negativity around performance issues and such. These people are not stupid, they are not unaware of the potential issues of people, re-experiencing bugs and issues and performance issues, but obviously they decided that the benefits outweigh that. Especially as they know they have an engaged and highly passionate fan base to help with disseminating the information about they already have made statements about improvements to performance, squashing of bugs, refinement of weapons and related mechanics that will all be in the game at launch, and the second beta does not represent that. Oh, and almost forgot, for the record, again, even though Gypsarus is new to the second beta, it's not actually new code, believe it or not. Because during and after the first beta, data mining clever clogs of that code had already discovered that Gypsarus's 3D model, at the very least, was present in that download already. So, including it in the second beta might not have been much more complicated for Capcom than just switching him on, essentially. In fact, Gypsarus was not even the only monster hidden in the code of the first beta, but I will not dive into that there because a lot of people will consider it spoilery because it includes at least one monster that has not been revealed yet. So, I guess this video is my contribution to heading off the clickbaiting misinformation from willfully malicious creators or just hopelessly ignorant clowns who are going to whine and thrash about the performance issues again, not knowing the full story of it. It's also important to understand that I don't have a blind faith in the devs. I'm really hoping it's going to be 100% fixed in the release, but I'm not guaranteeing it. I'm not staking my own reputation on that. I friggin' love Monster Hunter, but as anyone who was there at the launch of Monster Hunter World from these same devs will tell you, it had notorious performance issues, particularly on the consoles at launch. There were some spaces in that game where you would struggle for 25 FPS for crying out loud. Those issues were fixed, but the launch was rocky. So I'm not sitting here claiming that there's nothing to worry about. We should still be all on our toes and be a little bit worried that, performance issues might hinder our enjoyment of this highly anticipated game. I'm only hoping to bring clarity and perspective to how old that beta code really is in relation to the launch code, and that the devs have spent 4 months listening to and responding to the feedback from the first beta. And they have specifically made addresses toward performance improvements alongside the weapon mechanics and stuff. Once again, the first beta was 125 days before launch, running on code that is absolutely older than 125 days before launch. And that's the same code the second beta will be running. So that is your perspective for all this. Even if you know basically nothing about how game development works, that is a significant amount of time to continuously keep working on something before the launch version, right? So, well, it might not be a perfect launch. In fact, it won't be a perfect launch, because name a AAA game that launched perfect. Just try. It will be, without much doubt, at least noticeably better at launch than what this beta, and of course the first beta, were able and will be able to demonstrate to us. So thanks for watching. I am Lanty. I will catch you next time. Thank you, as always, to the patrons.